Hey everyone, Margarita here again with episode number 9 of my severe carbon monoxide poisoning. I'd left off with I removed myself from the building once I figured out that the level was never 0 in the building, and I was not going to catch them. They were going to continue to injure me basically until I was dead and not offer any treatment or help or pay. So by this time, I had seen numerous, I don't know if they were actually certified HVAC people or if they were just regular handymen working on this ventilation system, but they did have numerous people in there several times, all during, these last several weeks, these last couple months. This had been going on pretty heavily. And right before I removed myself from the building, there was an incident where I was already overloaded. This had already broken through my brain tissue. I was barely alive. And I was in there while somebody was working on the ventilation system, and I almost lost consciousness. The guy had shut the ventilation system off to work on it with the restaurant operating and fully running, and shut it off. And that's when I almost lost consciousness. I was about less than a minute away from dying. And that's when I started talking to God again. And I said, God, I'm going to die again. I think I'm going to die again. I need something to happen. How can this be? There's someone working on the ventilation system. I thought there was 0. I'm not understanding what's going on here. Something needs to happen or I'm not going to make it. And I was about to lose consciousness. All oxygen was cut off from my brain. I was already in an altered state of consciousness. And then it became very, very extreme. And right before this happened, a couple people looked at me and they said, wow, your face is really pale and your lips are really, really red. And that's from the carbon monoxide. So as soon as I was having these thoughts, the guy working on the ventilation system, he flipped the switch, and the ventilation system turned on and started sucking up all the particles, all the carbon monoxide that was coming off the appliances that was building up in the building while this was happening to me. As soon as I started talking directly to God, immediately that guy flipped the switch. But it didn't matter because, again, the building was never 0. I was already overloaded. The fire department, I did speak to the fire chief. He was not understanding that I was already completely overloaded with carbon monoxide. It had already broken through my brain. I'd already had a brain injury while giving birth from it almost 2 years prior without knowing, and that got covered up. Now it's already broken through my brain completely, and I'm past the point of no return, and I'm completely overloaded with carbon monoxide. He was not understanding. I was continuously stuck like that day in and day out. He was acting like I was just feeling that way in the building, and then I removed myself, and then everything's fine. Oh, call us back if you feel that way again. What do you mean? I'm stuck like that. I was stuck like that for almost 3 years straight before I had one day of relief. And this guy was acting like that's not what was going on. And then I later found out there was some corruption with the building inspector in Taylor, Michigan. You could probably Google this. In Taylor, Michigan, there was some corruption with the building inspector and the buildings in that city, which is where this restaurant was located during that time. And he, I believe, did jail time over it. I'm not sure. I never really looked into it, but I do believe it's a possibility that he was tied in with the case with this building because these levels were very high at certain times, and they did still operate illegally numerous times. So I don't know if it's actually related, but it very well could be. And the response I got from the fire department was that not that of a normal response for the situation at hand. So that is suspicious in my eyes, especially with what I was going through at that time. And, in this moment, while I was gathering this information at the restaurant, the last little bit that I was there, I was in a very extreme state of confusion. At the same time, I was having all these severe symptoms. So to figure all this out in that state, it was very, very hard to do. And I was still learning, and the carbon monoxide creates confusion. And then I have brain injuries as well. And I'm just really confused, and everybody's lying. So that just made it worse. The fact that everybody was lying about what was actually going on, that just topped it all off right there. Now, like I said, those hoods had a carbon monoxide alarm in them to go off if there's a high level of carbon monoxide. And that's why they were shutting the ventilation off, because the alarm wouldn't go off because there was such a high level. Same with the home ones that I talked about. The home ones are not meant to go off for a certain period of time, for X amount of hours at a certain high level. I think it's got to be 50 parts per million for somewhere between 2 and 4 hours in a home detector before that ever goes off. If that's what I was relying on, and there was carbon monoxide to that degree in my home, I would be dead waiting on that thing to go off with the condition I'm in. So I don't actually rely on that, and I don't even know if I actually have proper carbon monoxide detectors in my house because I don't really use them. They're not going to go off. They're not going to save my life. Those are not the type that is needed. What is needed is an up to the second detector. And none of the ones that are made for homes are up to the second detectors. They do that intentionally. It's natural population control, basically. Number one. Number two, people would be calling the fire department with every little bit of carbon monoxide, and people aren't aware that there's little bits of it everywhere throughout the world. And there's quite a bit of it in many different buildings, many different types of facilities, and with every gas stove. So there's in every car that you put gas in, there's carbon monoxide everywhere. And since COVID, it has been reduced, I guess you could say, throughout the world. I think because of what I've been through and what I had to figure out and how I had to figure out how I was going to get myself to and from treatment an hour away and travel through carbon monoxide and traffic when I couldn't, I had to figure all of this out. So these little bits of carbon monoxide throughout the world, those are considered safe for the general population. If you're overloaded with it already and you're experiencing continuous symptoms, it's not safe. You can't have any. You are going to have to get it up to the second detector. Any of those other detectors that you would buy at the regular store, those are not up to the second detectors. And it's pretty much, if you're overloaded with it already and you're relying on one of those, you're going to be dead. They do not work to that degree. They will not go off for several hours. It has to be a high level before those things ever go off. They make them that way on purpose. And so I can show you up to the second detector I've been carrying around for years now. It actually comes in a case. I've had the same one the entire time. It is up to the second. It will let you know. It will start teetering around a half a part per million between 0 and 1. If that is the case, it says 0. I could blow in it, which I just did, and it didn't really give me a read. It shouldn't give me a reading. I shouldn't have any in my system right now. I mean, it's always in my system, but it comes out as I'm removing it in loads. There's thresholds that I cross, and it comes out in like cycles and loads over time as I'm doing certain things along the way daily to help remove it. And then depending on if I'm treating at the same time or not, that's another factor. And right now I have not been treating. It is self-pay. I am currently out of money. There's several factors involved here, and I'm in need of quite a bit more treatment. But if I can prevent someone else from ever even being in this predicament in the first place, I think I'll be able to prevent quite a few people, because this information that I'm sharing with everyone is not widely known. It's not known within the medical system. It's not known like in general. You can't even find this stuff to the degree that I understand it on Google. And I was sitting here Googling for years on end and reading thousands and thousands of case studies. So this is the type of detector that you want to have. One that will change immediately if you have 1 part per million, you want to see that go up to 1 immediately. If you have 10 parts per million and this one actually goes off at 10, it'll make this loud, high-pitched beeping noise at 10 parts per million. And with me, like, I'm hypersensitive. I need to be notified at 1. But what it is I understand where it all comes from. So I just kind of monitor the monitor if I'm in a place where that could be. And I'm also in a different place with it as well. Like I said, I crossed several thresholds. It's not extremely urgent with one the way it once was, but it still can't be had. It will cause a problem long term. It is going to add to the toxic bucket that will eventually lead to an overflow or make it so that I'm not able to do like what little bit I am doing. So that is a problem still. It's just, it doesn't become, it's still extreme because it's overloading your system and taking your oxygen. It's putting you closer to death overall. So there is still an issue. It's just, I'm not going to become like near death with 1 part per million for a short period of time the way I once was. Before, in the beginning, even the first year of treatment, over a year of treatment, 1 part per million, getting a couple breaths of it on the ride there, on the ride back, would set me back an entire week's worth of treatment and cause extreme symptoms. I was already suffering continuous extreme symptoms, and then this put me past the point of extreme, and it would be even worse. And I basically waste my money for that whole week, removing that one exposure that I had the week prior, getting stuck behind one wrong car for 2 minutes on the ride there or the ride back. And I was reversing all the treatment that I had just done for that week, which is $1,000 a person. And there was two of us in the vehicle doing treatment. So $2,000 a week. And at the same time, my son would have the same exact problems as me, except his symptoms were slightly different. He did vomit quite a bit. So when we were having these little exposures, traveling to and from the treatment center, once we did finally get treatment, and here we are trying to clear the bulk load of it, and we were having just tiny little exposures like what I just mentioned, the next day I'd be pulling over with him vomiting and more brain swelling, and he would actually vomit the next day if there was a tiny little exposure. That's to the degree where he was for a couple of years. Shortly after I overloaded, so did he. So I'll get more into what happened after I removed myself from the restaurant, because there's a whole lot more that went on. I just want to get the baseline of the story out. But yes, that was a very serious issue that did go on for a couple years in that manner. I think it was like more than 2 years, actually. I think it was, I don't know, maybe 3 years that it was that extreme, 3 to 3.5 years where it was that extreme. And I'll get more into what we went through along the way, because as we're going through this and crossing thresholds, there is re-injuries and re-exposures going on, and it's taking us, or I guess I should more say me. Yes, it did play a role in both of our lives significantly, but with me, we reached a point where I was actually more fragile than him, and I still am to this day. I'm more injured than him currently. And I've been for a while. We were at the same degree for quite some time, and then we crossed a threshold together, and then he kind of shot forward, and I got significantly re-injured without him getting re-injured. And that caused us to be at different levels now. So now he's like up here, and I'm like down here, whereas we were like neck and neck for a couple years during this. We were at the same rate. And now he's significantly more better than me, which is actually a good thing. And now that he's getting older, I just have to teach him how to understand how all of this works. Just like a child with a peanut allergy, that's very dangerous for a child, with that condition to go out into the world and not have the proper information to protect themselves, especially if the parent is not around. But my child is homeschooled, so it's a little different. The sensitivity is very extreme. He is very sensitive to other types of things that a regular person would not be. And a regular ignorant person could put him near death very fast. So that is why part of the reason why he is homeschooled. The other reason is I don't have daily functioning. I'm having like a really hard time, like still piecing back together daily functioning. I can't get up. I can't be woken up either. I have to let my brain do things naturally on its own time. So at least if we're here, I can just kind of say, hey, get up, you have a class. As long as he's getting enough rest, he can get up and do those things himself at this point. However, it was a rough start, and I'll get more into that in the future on what we went through with all that. But it has impacted our daily lives. Every minute of every day of our lives have been impacted by this injury, and to receive no compensation and have to pay everything I spent out of pocket just to get us to where we even are today. And to go all those years with no quality of life whatsoever before even reaching where we are today. Most people wouldn't be alive if they went through what we've been through. Most people don't ever have access to that kind of money within a lifetime, let alone in the short period of time that I was forced to come up with it. There's many factors involved in why we're still here. But I will get more into what occurred after I removed myself from the building, but I just wanted to show everybody what this detector should look like. And it should cost at least $150. If you're not spending that much money or a little bit more on one of these up to the second detectors, it's probably a cheap version that may not work so well, or may not alert you. It may be calibrated wrong, or it may not really alert you when you think it should. But you want to see the one that changes with every part per million up to the second. And you will be spending at least $150, I believe. I do think this one was $200. But they do last, and there's many different professions that I would recommend, especially if you're going into different homes and different buildings regularly. I would say this would almost be a necessity in any of those lines of work, even if they don't tell you that that's required. Just based on what I've experienced and how I know carbon monoxide works. If you regularly, I don't care what your job is, if you're regularly going into different buildings and or different people's homes, or spending quite a bit of time in a vehicle most of your day, I would say that this is a requirement to keep yourself healthy and carbon monoxide free because of the way it works and how much is actually out there in the world and what people pick up. Even if your job does not tell you that is required, I would personally look into that. But I will be back with another one. Thanks. Bye.